Have you ever noticed how your brain goes crazy when you meet someone attractive for the first time? Or how investors pile into a hot new stock, even when they barely understand what the company does? There's actually a fascinating psychological reason behind this, and it affects everything from your love life to your investment portfolio. Our brains are essentially hardwired to obsess over novelty. When we encounter something new and unknown, our minds don't just notice it, they become almost intoxicated by it. It's like our brain's reward system gets flooded with possibilities, and suddenly, reality takes a back seat to imagination. Think about when you first meet someone you're attracted to. You know almost nothing about them, but that's precisely what makes them so captivating. Your mind fills in the blanks with idealized fantasies. Every smile could mean something profound. Every conversation feels electric. You project all your desires and hopes onto this blank canvas of a person. The mystery creates this intense psychological pull that can feel almost overwhelming. The same mechanism kicks in with the stock market. When a company announces a revolutionary new technology or a completely fresh business model hits the scene, investors experience that same rush. There's limited information, no track records to analyze, just pure potential. And just like with that attractive stranger, people started projecting their wildest dreams onto these unknown entities. This could be the next Amazon, they thought. This could change everything. What's really happening here is information asymmetry combined with our brain's love affair with uncertainty. When we don't have complete information, instead of becoming cautious, we often become more excited. The unknown isn't scary, it's exhilarating. It's a space where anything seems possible, where we can imagine the best-case scenario without the weight of disappointing reality. This is why new stocks often experience these explosive rallies that seem disconnected from any rational valuation. Speculative money rushes in because everyone wants to be first. They want to catch that wave before everyone else figures it out. The novelty itself becomes the asset. But here's the catch: just like with romantic fantasies, once reality sets in, the bubble often bursts. You start actually getting to know that person, and they are not quite the fantasy you built up. The company releases its earnings reports, and suddenly the revolutionary business model has very real limitations. Meanwhile, established companies with transparent tracking records barely moved the market. Everyone knows their story. There's no mystery, no imagination required. It's like being in a long-term relationship, comfortable, predictable, but not exactly thrilling. The information is all there, laid out in quarterly reports and years of performance data. There's nothing left to fantasize about. The contrast is striking. Novelty plus uncertainty plus imagination space equals intense, short-term impulse. Whether that's a passionate infatuation or a speculative buying frenzy, the pattern is identical. But familiarity plus predictability? That equals stability, lower impulses, and frankly, less excitement. The emotional intensity fades because reality has replaced imagination. But here's what's really important to understand: this novelty impulse is fundamentally a short-term phenomenon. It has an expiration date built into its psychology. If you could graph the intensity of these impulses over time, you'd see a dramatic spike at the beginning, that initial infatuation peak, that speculative frenzy followed by an inevitable decline as familiarity sets in and reality replaces fantasy. In romantic relationships, researchers actually tracked this pattern. There's what they call the limerence phase, that obsessive, all-consuming infatuation that typically lasts anywhere from a few months to about 2 years. During this time, your brain is literally flooded with dopamine and norepinephrine, the same chemicals involved in addiction. You are high on novelty, but then the curve flattens. The mystery dissolves. You see the person as they actually are, not as your imagination painted them. And for many people, this feels like the passion has died. But what's really happened is that short-term novelty impulse has given way to something potentially more valuable: long-term stability and genuine understanding. The exact same pattern plays out in markets. A hot news stock might surge 300% in its first few months based purely on hype and imagination. But once the quarterly earnings start rolling in, once analysts have actual data to work with, the price often corrects dramatically. The novelty premium evaporates. What remains is the company's actual value, stripped of fantasy. Some of these companies turn out to be genuine long-term winners, but many don't survive the transition from imagination to reality. And this is where mature, established entities started to show their real strength. Yes, a blue-chip company with 20 years of steady performance isn't going to give you that dopamine rush. A stable, long-term relationship where you actually know your partner's flaws and quirks isn't going to feel like that electric first encounter. But what they offer instead is something the novelty impulse completely overlooks: predictability, reliability, and compound returns over time. The boring stock that grows 8% annually for 20 years will massively outperform the exciting startup that crashes after its novelty wears off. The stable relationship built on genuine compatibility will outlast a dozen passionate flings that burned out after the mystery faded. The key insight here is recognizing that short-term impulses and long-term values operate on completely different timescales and completely different psychological mechanisms. Your brain's novelty-seeking system is optimized for exploration and opportunism. It wants you to check out new possibilities. But your long-term well-being depends on your ability to distinguish between the thrill of novelty and actual sustainable value. So what can you actually do with this understanding? Let me give you some practical strategies. In relationships, when you feel that overwhelming attraction to someone new, acknowledge it for what it is: your brain responding to mystery and possibility, not necessarily to genuine compatibility. Before making any major decisions, give yourself time, watching how they behave over weeks and months, not just in those exciting first encounters. Notice the gap between who you imagined them to be and who they actually are. That gap is where reality lives. The smaller the gap, the better your instincts. The larger the gap, the more you were chasing a fantasy. For investing, the strategy is similar, but with one important twist: you can actually afford to play with novelty in small, controlled doses. If a revolutionary new technology or company catches your attention, it's fine to allocate a small portion of your portfolio, maybe 5 or 10%, to explore that impulse. Think of it as tuition for learning how markets work. But you're serious. Retirement planning. Long-term wealth should be built on established companies with track records, transparent financials, and proven business models. Data and fundamentals over imagination and hype. Let the novelty seekers take the big risks. You'll capture more sustainable returns by being patient and selective. The broader principle applies everywhere. Use your awareness of the novelty effect as a circuit breaker for impulsive decisions. When you feel that surge of excitement about something new, don't suppress it. That's part of being human. But also don't let it drive major decisions unchecked. Create a waiting period. Gather actual information. Watch the impulse curve decline, and see what remains when the novelty wears off. What's still valuable after 3 months, 6 months, a year? That's where you should invest your time, money, and emotional energy. Understanding this psychological pattern doesn't just help you make better decisions, it helps you understand the architecture of your own desires. The novelty effect is powerful, ancient, and deeply embedded in how we make decisions. But once you see it clearly, you gain something invaluable: the ability to choose when to follow the impulse and when to let it pass. Knowing that what glitters in the moment isn't always gold in the long run.